All righty. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Luncheon with the Experts, a Carcinoid Cancer Foundation program brought to you by Lexicon Pharmaceuticals. My name is Rain Bennett. I have been working with CCF for about 10 years now. I'm a filmmaker and video producer, and we create video content that helps spread awareness and education about NETs. If you've been following the series, you know that I just recently moved in. And I got a new desk, as you can see, and we're starting to get some things here. But a lot of boxes still on the ground beside me. But we're finding a new home, and I'm happy you all are joining us in this new project we're super excited about. First of all, we want to say major thanks to our presenting sponsor, Lexicon Pharmaceuticals. You know, without their support, we wouldn't be able to make this weekly program happen. And just a quick disclaimer from them, we want to say that the opinions expressed by the guest presenters, as well as the questions asked by the audience, that you all at home, have not been created or suggested by the sponsors of the Facebook Live program, and CCF does not endorse nor promote any of the views, opinions, or information provided in this presentation. Audience members should not rely solely on the opinions or information expressed by the guest presenter and should seek guidance and direction from their own medical advisors regarding any choices about their health or treatments. So all that's saying is make sure to communicate with your team, plan with your team. We're going to hopefully give you some advice and answer some of your questions today. That's what we have our guest here for. But by all means, don't run rogue. Talk to your home team, reach out to other specialists, and make sure that everybody is on the same page for any plan that you have moving forward. So today, our guest is Dr. Xavier Keutgen. Doctor, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me today, Rain.
Absolutely. Can you tell the folks at home a little bit about your place in this neuroendocrine cancer world, what you do, what you specialize in?
Sure. So I am originally from Belgium, actually, which you may recognize on a slight accent.
Just a slight.
I'm actually from the German-speaking part of Belgium. That's why you recognize the German accent. But I actually did my medical school in Germany, and then I did my entire training in the US, except for 1 year where I went back to Switzerland. But what I essentially do is I'm a surgical oncologist. So I'm a surgeon that specializes in cancers, and I specifically specialize actually in neuroendocrine tumors, or NETs. I am here at the University of Chicago, in Chicago, and I've been in Chicago for about 4 years. I started at Rush, and now I've been here at the University of Chicago for about almost 2 years, actually, in November. And so my practice is about 60 to 70% neuroendocrine tumor patients. I also have a laboratory here at the University of Chicago, and I do some basic science and translational research in NETs as well. So that's me in a few sentences.
That's you in a nutshell. Well, I'll add on to that because I see a comment already from Morgan that says, the man, the myth, the legend, Dr. Keutgen. So your reputation precedes you.
I don't know about that. I don't know about the myth.
That's all right. You let the people speak for you, doctor. You let the people speak for you. You can be modest, but let the people, praise you. And I also want to send a shout out to Dr. Aman Chouhan, who I see just joined us. Hello, Aman. Good to see you. We love to see our community. And speaking of which, I see some of you are already used to the drill, and you're telling us where you're from. We love to hear where you are in the world and see how far we reach with this program. That's been one of the most exciting things about it, is we legitimately get thousands of views from people all over the world, and we've been getting great feedback and messages from the help, the direct impact that we've provided with some of these. So that's what we do it for. That's what we're excited about. Luncheon with the Experts is a little bit different than our previous Facebook Live shows. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the guest and what makes them tick, what makes them work, what they love about this community, how we can all be better members of this community and learn more and have a better journey through this. So go ahead and send in your questions. Let us know what you're interested in. Obviously, we have Dr. Keutgen here. Obviously, he has his specialty, but he has told us that he's an open book and he's ready to field any questions. Obviously, if they're too case specific, we can't get to the nitty gritty of your specific case, as he's not your doctor, but we'll try to answer in general terms. And if we don't get to your questions, just know that you can follow up with the Carcinoid Cancer Foundation page here on their Facebook page, or reach out to them at carcinoid.org, and they will get you the information or direct you to the person or people who can get you the information that you are seeking. Lastly, before we get started, we just want to say we know how challenging it can be a NET patient, especially in this time of the pandemic. And CCF is here for you whenever you need us. This is our function. This is our job. This is what we're here for. And if you would like to show support in return and help us continue to create these programs, you can text the word experts to 1-914-380-7323. Again, that's experts to 914-380-7323. Every donation makes a difference, no matter how small, and we appreciate you all for that. We'll try to put that number and the word to text experts in the comments, and along with that, any links or references that Dr. Keutgen makes today, we will try to include in the comments. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about, and as the questions come in, Doctor, I want to know a little bit about what have you been working on lately? I mean, 2020 has been such a weird year for all of us. I mean, weird in the best sense, bad for many of us, but for those that are able to sustain, it's been a challenging year. But are there any things that you're excited about that you've been working on, or that are coming down the pike? What's been going on in your world?
Yeah, so it's been a very challenging year, indeed, and we had to shut down the hospital for a few weeks, so we stopped doing surgeries. But that actually gave me personally a little bit of time to focus a little bit more on my research. And so, because I do have a laboratory, and we're specifically looking at how to make prRT, which is one of the therapies that use for like neuroendocrine tumors, better. It gave me a little bit of time to actually focus on that research, why I was not sort of stuck in the OR. And so it's been a pretty exciting year, I have to say. Since I joined the University of Chicago in November 2018, I've really been able to build a really nice lab. We have a great team in the lab. We have made some, I think, pretty impactful discoveries already in that short amount of time. So trying to make a therapy better that is very, very currently employed is really, I think, a very important step towards making sure that all patients get the best possible therapies, and hopefully at some point to be able to cure this disease. So that's been actually really nice, that I've been able to spend a little bit of time focusing on the screen and reviewing all the data, writing some manuscripts, writing some grants. All of that has been really great. And then the second thing that we have also been doing, which is also sort of related to research, is we have finally finalized one of our 2 protocols that we're going to open up, which is a clinical trial. And that is actually going to start very soon, and it will be one of 2 trials, and that trial that's been finalized is going to be a trial using Zermello before we take patients to the operating room. And so we're going to see whether that can sort of stabilize their vital sign function throughout these big surgery cases that we do. So that's very exciting. And then there's a second trial that's hopefully going to be opening soon, but it takes a lot of time and work to do these. And that trial is going to be for neoadjuvant prRT. So that's using prRT before we take patients to the operating room. So those are 2 sort of really exciting trials that we are opening. And I have to say that we are the main center at the University of Chicago to open, but we are very helpful. We are very happy to have the help from also Jim Howe at the University of Iowa, and Rod Palmier. So that will be sort of both of them will be sort of institutional trials, which we are very, very excited about. So that's what I've been working on since the downtime that we've had.
Well, that's impressive. By the way,
break.
Say that again.
I haven't taken too much of a break.
No, it doesn't sound like it.
I can't leave anywhere. There's no more flying to Europe for me for now. So
right, or anywhere.
I'm home in my office.
And to everyone at home, the two doctors that he mentioned, Dr. Howe and Dr. Pommier, will both be guests on Luncheon with the Experts. And Dr. Howe is actually coming up in a couple of weeks. Quick question, Dr. Keutgen, is there an ideal candidate for those two trials? Like who would they?
So again, I mean, the second one's not open yet, but the second
Right.
one, which is the prRT trial, will focus mostly, or I should say, like exclusively for now, on like pancreatic neuroendocrine tumors, where there is a liver disease, and that would be considered from a surgical perspective as being debulkable. So where we could remove the tumor in your liver, and you would then be randomized towards getting prRT up front before the surgery and see what that does, whether it makes our operation easier and whether it takes longer for a tumor to come back or not down the line. And then the Zermello trial is a trial where it would be mostly small bowel neuroendocrine tumors. Again, with liver metastases in those patients that have what's called carcinoid syndrome, so that have the flushing and the diarrhea, or that have a serotonin or 5-HIA level that's high. If you are one of those patients and you want to participate in the trial in like any of these three locations, we would give you 2 weeks of Zermello before going to the OR and see whether that can diminish your rate of hemodynamic like instability throughout the case. So I think that's also pretty exciting.
That is exciting. I appreciate you sharing that with us. So we've already got a great amount of people joining us. The numbers are rising. I love to see that. And questions already coming in. So we're going to go ahead and get to questions from the audience because the people have them, Doctor. I want to say a couple of rules of engagement for everybody back home. If Dr. Keutgen gives a great answer and a lot of value, we got to let him know. And the best way to do that is to send one of those thumbs up or one of those heart emojis down there at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And if you know someone that would benefit from this, go ahead and share this on your own pages. Share this live video. You can also make a viewing party. Let anyone else that in the community that would benefit from this know that this is going on now. But if they aren't able to make it, it will live here under the videos tab on the Carcinoid Cancer Foundation Facebook page, as well as be reposted on the following Monday on the Carcinoid Cancer Foundation's YouTube channel if someone doesn't have Facebook. So I just wanted to let you know that. Don't forget about the thumbs up and the heart emojis. Those are crucial for us knowing that we did our job. So Dr. Keutgen, I have the first question from Scarlet Sunshine, and I just have to say, shout out Scarlet to maybe the coolest name other than mine, Sunshine and Rain. I love it. We'd either be best friends or arch rivals. I'm not sure, but she says, "What is your expert opinion about performing surgery on a net tumor mass located in the superior mesenteric artery?"
Yeah, so again, pretty case specific, difficult to exactly comment on this because I don't have the CT scan, but what usually happens is that these tumors don't start around the superior mesenteric artery, but they actually spread there. They usually, most commonly, when they go around the superior mesenteric artery, they start in the small bowel, so I'm assuming that that's your case, and they sort of drain along the lymph node channels to what we call the root of the mesentery or the superior mesenteric artery. And so it depends. Generally speaking, we often like to remove the primary tumor, even if we cannot completely remove some of the lymph nodes that are all the way up at the root of the mesentery. The reason why we couldn't remove them is if they're completely encasing the vessel, because it is the main vessel that supplies your small bowel and your large bowel. And so if you take that vessel, your small bowel or large bowel would not be able to live. So that would not be a good option because you need your large bowel and your small bowel. We can take away with surgery little pieces of it here and there, but not obviously the entire gut. So difficult to say exactly for your particular case, Scarlett, but I do think that most of the time we would want to remove at least the primary tumor and all the lymph nodes as high up as we can. And sometimes even if it's at the root of the mesentery, if it's not completely encasing the vessel, we could sort of take part of those tumor cells or of those tumor chunks away. And the advantage of that is that it prevents, or it's thought to prevent, problems, because again, the primary tumor usually don't start at the root of the mesentery, they start somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And if it's in the bowel, for example, that's where your tumor started, you want to make sure that that you get that removed in most cases, because you could prevent obstruction and bleeding and all kinds of problems that can later on happen. And it's completely like anecdotal, but it's often, interestingly, the mass at the mesentery that grows the least rapidly. So I've had many patients, and probably Rod Palmier and Jim Howe will tell you the same thing, where they had the primary tumor in the bowel, it spread to the lymph nodes around the bowel, to the root of the mesentery, and to the liver. You take these patients to the operating room, you clean out the liver, you take out the primary tumor and all the lymph nodes around it, but you leave that package around the superior mesenteric artery. And interestingly, if these tumors tend to come back, they tend to come back most commonly in the liver. That's where the tumors then grow. And it's sort of the root of the mesentery that's the one that grows the least rapidly. So it's not necessarily because you have a tumor at the root of the mesentery that you should not undergo an operation.
Got it. Thank you. Hopefully that helps, Scarlett. Real quick, I had a comment from David Chen who says, Dr. Keutgen, good work, old friend. Just happened to see this now. Congrats. Expect nothing less. So he's just sending some love. And I love that too. That seemed to have happened organically, and that speaks a lot to the overall community that we talk about.
I hope he's doing well. It's been a while I haven't talked to him, but
yeah, well.
Hi to you, Dave.
He says hello. Okay, next up we have a question from Anita. Would like to know your thoughts on A, number of prRT rounds, and B, the risk of leukemia from prRT, and C, most importantly, alternatives to prRT. So let's start with the first one. Thoughts on prRT rounds.
Right. So generally speaking, the general thinking about prRT, again, stands for peptide receptor radionucleotide therapy, for those who don't know, or lutetium-177, which is a sort of systemic infusion that's given through a vein. And classically in the United States, it's giving once every other month for a total of 4 cycles. So it's an 8 months therapy. 200 millicurie is the dose that's generally used for every dose that's like injected. So it's a total of 800 millicurie. The beauty with this therapy, and we are very lucky in the neuroendocrine tumor world because there's very few cancer therapies that are as targeted as prRT is that it basically affects mostly neuroendocrine tumor cells with little side effects generally. And that is because these molecule binds on specific receptors that are usually only or almost only found on the surface of these tumor cells. So except for radioactive iodine therapy for thyroid cancer, which has been around since the 60s, this is really the first real targeted therapy systemically when combining radiation for cancer. So it's a beautiful therapy. It's a beautiful concept, but it has its limitations. It doesn't work perfectly. It obviously doesn't cure like everybody. Otherwise, we would be all out of a job. And I mean, I wish I will be out of a job at some point from that perspective. But I do think that one of the thinking is that we're not really sure how much you can give patients when it comes to the radiation dose. And this comes back to your first question. So generally 800 millicuries over 4 cycles what's given. There have been studies in Europe where people have been retreated with prRT, so they've gotten 4 cycles, and then later on, a couple of years later, they've gotten another 2 or even 4 cycles. There is a study, I believe, in Canada right now, where they are looking at sort of giving lower doses of prRT, but sort of over more contiguous ways, so 50 or 100 millicuries, but then you get it every month or every other week even. So we're not really sure exactly what the optimal dose is. When a study gets designed and a drug comes on the market, the most important thing is usually to try to avoid harm to patients. And so the dose is sort of, and the number of cycles has been chosen sort of arbitrarily, but mostly based on some safety data that was found out of European studies. And so So I don't have a particular opinion on this, but I do think it will get adjusted over time, meaning as we, and this is what my lab, for example, looks at, is how to make PRT better. So trying to understand why certain tumors respond better to PRT than like others. And so I think if we understand that, and if we perhaps then combine PRT with other drugs, this is when we could potentially lower the PRT dose over time, or maybe give PRT at a different time points than we're doing right now. So we're still researching, we're still trying to understand what's going on, we're still trying to see whether there's any ways to improve PRT. And I am a firm believer that there are ways to improve PRT by understanding, as I said, a better why tumor response, why certain tumors in patients respond better than others, what makes those tumors manipulate like other tumors to make them more sensitive, or combine with certain drugs that makes PRT work better and perhaps at lower doses. And to your third question on the leukemia or the chance of bone marrow damage of PRT, so anytime we give anybody radiation, even though PRT is a low dose radiation generally compared to other things that we give radiation for, there are side effects. Obviously, this is a drug that gets circulated throughout your entire body, and even though it docks mostly to neuroendocrine tumors, it still travels through your kidneys, it travels through your liver, and it also can damage the bone marrow. As far as we know, the chance of developing leukemia is low. It's in the few percent range down the line, but obviously, as you retreat with PRT, or you like accumulate radiation doses with like other things, such as, liver-directed therapy, where sometimes radioactive beads are used, or even external beam radiation in certain cases, that sort of cumulative radiation dose over time can certainly increase your chance. So the chances for PRT alone to develop problems, including bone marrow cancer, are very low over time. But we always have to keep that in mind, and certainly we need more research on that as well.
Thank you. That was thorough. Hopefully that helps, Anita. Okay. Let's see. We got an interesting question that I know is, we talked about this right before we went on, Dr. Keutgen. Steve says, in talking about the concerns specifically with COVID times, Steve has a question: have your routines for follow-up imaging change with the COVID crisis? My hospital does a ton of COVID care, and NYC public transport is a scary prospect, that's for sure. Are you still following your same protocols, waiting to see what happens with the pandemic, having patients get imaging elsewhere? How are we approaching this?
Yeah, so I think this was particularly hard for us in Chicago, and I think probably even harder for you in New York, because you guys got even hit even harder. But we had a similar situation where we sort of put a lot of things on hold for about 6 to 8 weeks in terms of surgeries, but also in terms of scanning. We really only wanted to get patients in when if it was absolutely necessary. And neuroendocrine tumor in general are well differentiated and slow growing. There are obviously exceptions, but we felt that it was the safest to postpone most of the scans. And I honestly think that postponing scans by 1, 2, or 3 months most of the time makes absolutely no difference for this particular disease. Similar with surgeries, we generally tend to operate on patients that have a favorable tumor biology and have a well-differentiated slow-growing tumor. So if you wait, you can usually wait safely for a few months. Now, there have been patients, for example, where we sort of used Lantorotide or sandostatin, so like octreotide, like long-acting octreotide which we know slows down tumor growth, to sort of postpone certain procedures. We've done that, and I think we've been able to do it safely, like every single time. But my general thinking is that it's generally safe, even though, again, it can be case specifically not safe, but generally it's safe to wait and postpone scanning. And ultimately, I always want to make sure that my patients are comfortable going to a facility and getting the scans. Here at the University of Chicago, and I think all over the US, most hospitals, if not all hospitals, are really paying very close attention to trying to make things as safe as possible, by requiring to wear masks, etc. And I have not, and I'm not aware of anybody, any of my patients or like anybody of my colleagues' patients that has contracted COVID getting a scan. But that doesn't mean it can't happen. And obviously, if you're not comfortable doing it, you should talk to your physician. Now, there's a little hint and a little trick that is often available that maybe a lot of patients are not aware of, is that a lot of these big like academic medical centers have outside imaging facilities that are not on the main campus. So, for example, the University of Chicago, you can get your scan done at like Orland Park, which is sort of 45 minutes from here. It's in the suburbs, and that's not a hospital, but it's actually just a facility where people get scanned. And so, there are no COVID patients that are housed in that facility.
Right.
So some patients feel safer doing that, for example. So I think asking your physician, what is a safe place where he or she thinks you can get the scan done is also another thing that you should look into.
That's a great tip about the getting your imaging done kind of outside of town. I like that a lot. Sticking with kind of the COVID theme here, I have another question. I know a lot of people have had to pivot to telehealth and doing virtual calls and things like that, no matter what the field that we're in, but especially in the medical field. And so Linda has a question that says, do you do virtual consultations to work with local oncologists? We talk so much in this program and in the net community about working with a specialist, but also with your team. We said it at the very beginning of the program. So do you consult on treatment that's ongoing?
I think that's a very good question. And I think it's really key. And I'm a really big proponent of working with your local doctors to make sure that you get easy access and a clear treatment plan that often can be done locally, quite frankly, except for maybe a few things like advanced surgery or prRT or certain things that certain facilities don't have. Most of the times when it comes to screening, scans, when it comes to like chemotherapy or things like the hormonal shots, all of these can be done really close to home. So I'm a big proponent of that. And for the virtual visit point, so I am doing more than half of my clinic is still virtual right now. So I'm seeing patients virtually, and it's quite easy to get in touch with me, and we can do a Zoom call like we do now, and a lot of, I think, physicians are doing that right now. We have a multidisciplinary team where you could see Dr. Liao, for example, our local medical oncologist here at the University of Chicago, at the same time than me. So we'll both log in the Zoom call, and we'll sort of have a virtual combined visit. And then I do think it's really key to keep in touch with the local oncologist, and I'm really in favor of getting them involved. Now, from a pure logistic perspective, it's actually because all these Zoom calls are sort of HIPAA regulated, and there's lots of rules around it. It's not allowed that somebody else joins the Zoom call that's not the patient, unless he's a physician that's treating the patient within the same facility. But for example, for like Tumor Board, we are working on actually a platform where because we're going virtually too with our Tumor Board right now, where we could potentially allow physicians to log in and present their own cases at our virtual Tumor Board and sort of get like our opinion. It's a little tricky because it takes a lot of regulations to make sure that all the patient information and data is kept safe. So there's not patient data that gets shared with a physician that doesn't take care of that patient. And so we're working on it. But in the meantime, what I do is pretty old school, is I just pick up the phone and I call the referring physicians, and I'll talk to them over the phone or sometimes over email.
I have a question. Does this, this pivot that we've all had to make to video calls and Zoom calls, et cetera, we're all semi-experts now. Has this helped, helped you do the job that you try to do? I know in the filmmaking world, sometimes creative restrictions force us to find new ways to do things that actually end up, allowing us to accomplish the task better. And I don't mean to downplay the gravity of COVID as some creative restriction, but has this pivot that we've had to make, does it make it easier for you to reach out to people like that you weren't previously able to, or does it kind of clog the system? Has it been beneficial or kind of a disadvantage in terms of being able
I think it's generally beneficial, quite frankly. I think it allows access to patients that perhaps are 7-8 hours away, or even on the east or west coast, that they want to talk to me. And it's a lot easier now, and the hospitals are in favor of it. CMS changed their coding, so now hospitals can actually be reimbursed for these visits, which before was a big issue, which is also one of the reasons why it wasn't done that frequently. So I think that as the entire system has switched remarkably rapidly, quite frankly, towards virtual visits, I think we all benefit from this. I think it allows easier access for patients, definitely, especially those that are not local. And it allows patients, and I'm always a big proponent of that, to get sort of an easy second or third opinion on their case, which before seemed to be a lot harder,
and that's so something that's super important,
right? And I think it's huge, right? I mean, if I would have a tumor, or if I would have a cancer, if I would have a health problem, I would always go for second or third opinion. And it's not about not trusting the physician you're with. It's always good to hear from several people that the way you're going down is actually the right way to go. And especially for neuroendocrine tumors, there are very different ways on how to treat patients. They may not be right or wrong. It's just a different philosophy. And so I think hearing different physicians talk to you about different ways how they think your case should be dealt with, I think is very insightful for most patients. So that being said, I do think, especially as a surgeon, where I cannot operate on you virtually, not yet at least, I do think that it's very important to have a face-to-face interactions. I think it's part of who we are as human beings,
Totally.
And I do think that sort of gauging who the person across is from you gets done a lot easier in person than it is over Zoom. If a patient is anxious, if a patient is nervous, there's certain signs, that you can detect very well, like in person, that you may have a problem detecting over Zoom. So I don't think it's here to replace patients or like inpatients encounters. We are physicians. We want to be close to our patients. We want to examine our patients. We want to look at incisions after surgery, etc. But a lot of it can be, or a lot of, at least when it comes to second, third opinions or sort of treatment strategy design, can be done virtually. And again, I think it's helpful, but I'm not seeing that replacing in-person like interaction. And I hope it won't, because I do think it's really important.
Well, it seems to me like it's this great middle ground that was being neglected or avoided previously, where previously you would have like, you sign up for an appointment, then you have like no communication until it happens, and then you jump into it and it may be rushed, but you have that face-to-face moment. But now we have all this room in the middle for pre-connections, or like you said, getting second opinions or learning a little bit more along that journey, instead of it just being like before the appointment and after the appointment. Now you've got a bigger opportunity to get more information. I think I'm really interested to see, not just in the medical world, but in the world in general, how when we do come out of this, how the world and how we go about it will have changed by things that we've learned that we can do more efficiently or better, that we've been doing through the pandemic. Quick question, doctor, are you comfortable speaking about dip neck?
Very little. I mean, sure. I mean, I know certain things about it, and I've had patients of mine that had Dipnic. I could certainly see what the question is. Sure.
Well, the question is from Sherry. She says, "Is there anything new on the horizon?" I've got an answer for her as well. Not like yours, but I have a response, not an answer. But yeah, is there anything that you know of that's in terms of treatment for Dipnic? And let's talk a little bit.
Yeah. Right. So this would have been my exact comment right now on very little, because in the sense that I have not seen, but I have to admit I've not also looked recently over the last 3 to 6 months into any new studies that may have come out for that particular subtype of NETs. So I know there's been a lot of research and a lot of like investigation going into long-acting octreotide and maybe like everolimus for these tumors as well. But ultimately, I'm not really aware of anything new. But my awareness may be outdated by about 6 months. So so certainly, I do recommend that perhaps you look and see if there are maybe any resources like online where there are new studies that come out.
Okay, so my response, thank you, doctor. My response for Sherry is we actually will have a video on this topic in the future. We're working on a new series right now. While we're doing Luncheon with the Experts, we also are releasing a video series, a treatment-based video series that dives a little deeper into these topics with the top experts. And so we have one in the pipeline about lung nets and Dipnic specifically. Okay, we've released the first 2 in that series. One is an update to ABCs of neuroendocrine tumors. It's kind of an all-encompassing video, a 2020 update. The last one I did for CCF almost a decade ago, so a lot of things have happened. And we just released one on carcinoid syndrome and serotonin. You can find those here under the videos tab on the CCF Facebook page, as well as the Carcinoid Cancer Foundation YouTube channel. And I believe the next one coming out is on prRT, which we've talked a lot about. And I think we have about 9 or 10 of those coming out. So Sherry, unfortunately, we don't have much today for you, but we do have a video specifically on that topic coming out soon. And so for everybody else, stay tuned for those series. We have 2 of those already dropped, and we hope that you get a lot of value from those. Got a question from Regina, basically about travel. Her doctor is in another state. Do you think it's safe to travel on an airplane for scans and to see my doctor?
Yeah, that's a challenging question, quite frankly, because it obviously depends on a lot of factors, right?
Do you want any more information on her specific case, or?
Oh, I'd like to get more information on traveling in times of COVID, which I think we have not enough information on right now. The truth is, the airlines tell you a lot of things about, the filters they use, et cetera, but the matter of the truth is we don't really understand whether and how COVID is spreading through like airfare right now. So I really cannot say whether it's safe or not. Again, I think how I deal with some of my patients personally is that I do a virtual visit. If they are further away and they have to fly, I'll just do a virtual visit and I'll send them all the scripts to get all the scans done locally. And then they will FedEx the scans to me. I'll have them like uploaded in my system. I'll review them, and then during the virtual visits, we'll go through them. With screen sharing and all these things nowadays, you can actually really point out what is going on the scan, so the patients actually really understand that. So, I think that's probably the safest way to go about. But I'm not here to tell you that you shouldn't take a plane. I just don't know how safe it really is right now.
Yeah, no, I think that your suggestion was great. I mean, obviously this is not my area of expertise, but I just think that, everybody's trying to be safe rather than sorry. And if you can reduce or mitigate risk by that option that Dr. Keutgen just pointed out, that sounds like a great option to me. Another shout out from a patient of yours. Dr. Keutgen did my surgery in May of 2020. He is amazing. So grateful for his skill. They love you, doctor. They love you.
Thank you.
Look at that smirk. Yeah. See, it always. Yeah. It's always good to hear compliments, right? Not too many.
I don't want to turn red here.
No. Well, for everybody at home, I don't
want to flunk.
For everybody at home, I can't hear enough compliments, so don't hold back if you have any for me. They generally don't come up because it's always about the guest.
Man, you are awesome. We love you. You're the best moderator I've ever worked with.
I see hearts coming through right now.
I could do this all day with you. I mean, it's unbelievable. I've never felt so
stop.
well.
Stop.
Yeah, right.
Okay, let's see. Question from Karen about Lantorotide. Can Lantorotide injection cause eyelid swelling? Also, does a lower dose of Lantorotide work? Any thoughts on those?
Interesting questions.
Yeah.
I don't know about the eyelid swelling. I've not heard that as a side effect. However, certain people react to certain drugs or drug component in a very different way. So, eyelid swelling could certainly be some form of like allergic reactions. We know that from like other drugs. Not sure if that would be the case with Lantorotide. I've not heard of it, like particularly. I wouldn't rule it out completely, but it's certainly not a common or well-known side effect. Can it be used at lower doses? Good question as well. So it was designed with a formulation of 120 milligrams. That's just how it's been designed for the extended release. And it's thought to be sort of equivalent to a 30 milligram dose of sandostatin. So it's not the actual milligrams that really matter that much. It's more sort of the drug kinetics and the pharmacodynamic and kinetic of the drug that dictates the dosage. So as I am aware of, as far as I know, there's no lower doses of Lantorotide that are available. So I think 120 milligram is the smallest dose that's available. Some patients go on double shots, so they get 240 milligrams. But correct me if I'm wrong, like anybody out there, but I'm not sure that there's any lower doses of Lantorotide than 120 milligrams.
Copy that. Thank you, sir. We have a question from Dixie. Top fan Dixie says, "Hi, Rain, it's me again." Hello, Dixie. Welcome back. Speaking of prRT, there's a new alpha prRT in clinical trial right now. Was that the one you were referring to earlier?
No,
Okay.
I was referring to the standard.
Okay.
Like the
so Dixie says there is a new alpha prRT and in parentheses TAT in clinical trial right now. What does Dr. Keutgen think of this, and how soon could a patient who has had 4 prRT treatments have this new treatment?
I'm assuming it's 4 cycles that she had, but
yeah,
right. So which is one standard sort of treatment course of PRT.
Well, is that because you wouldn't have 4 treatments? Is that fair to say?
Well, you have one course is for injection or for infusion. So it's 4 cycles.
Right.
So if she says 4 treatments, I'm assuming it's 4 cycles.
Me too. Because on the flip side of that, you wouldn't come back and do that 4 times, right?
No, not that I'm aware.
All right. So that assumption is fair.
Right. So yes. So like alpha therapy is basically a similar principle. Again, it's this molecule that docks to the somatostatin receptors, except that what is attached to it now is not what's called a beta-emitting particle, but it's a like alpha-emitting particle. So an alpha-emitting particle in the world of radiology and radonc is a particle that has a lot more energy than the beta-emitting particle. That's just what it is, but it tends to also travel not as far because it's heavier. And so it's basically blasting the tumor with more energy, potentially inducing a higher destruction rate. Again, the problem is it may not travel as far, though, as beta-emitting particle. And when you think about a tumor, which is a sphere, grossly said, the receptors are on the surface. So if you give alpha therapy, it doesn't travel as far, but it destroys more of the outside. Is it really going to reach all the way or not? Perhaps it's better for bigger tumors to sort of, get rid of sort of the like outer shell. It's unclear really, and we need to see what the results look like. I would generally say that PRT, so the beta-emitting particles, is a very good therapy. I'm with very good data. So the Europeans have been using it for like 15 years. We have validated it in the large randomized controlled trial in the US called the NETA-1 trial. There's another 2 trial that's going on right now, but generally speaking, the beta-emitting therapy has been around for a long time. It's been very well validated and works quite well. Now, it doesn't work perfectly, and certainly for certain tumor subtypes, perhaps such as small bowel neuroendocrine tumors, you have less of a response rate, meaning less shrinkage, but that doesn't mean that therapy cannot be improved. And again, this comes back to trying to understand why certain people respond better to that therapy and why certain people don't, and then go back to sort of the nitty-gritty, the mechanisms, and then combining it with certain drugs or like other things to make prRT work better. So the short answer is we need more data for like alpha therapy. There are clinical trials going on, which is good. We are eagerly awaiting and seeing what that will show. And based on that, we'll see what the role is and when we will use it, whether it's for like different types of tumors, different types of nets, different sizes of tumors, et cetera, et cetera. So more to come there. And if you are like interested in going on one of these trials, you should look on clinicaltrials.gov, or maybe you have some information on the CCF website. I'm not sure, Rain, but clinicaltrials.gov is where you can find all clinical trials that are registered in the United States. Great. And if you type in like alpha therapy, then you will see what medical centers are like offering it, and then you can contact them. There's usually an email or phone number, and then they will be able to tell you whether in your particular case you would be a candidate to get it or not.
Got it. Thank you. So everybody that is listening and watching today at home, we got about 15 minutes left. Dr. Keutgen has a hard out right at the end of the hour. And so we're going to try to churn through and get through all your questions because, Doctor, there are a ton of them. They're coming in. And quite a few just people just sending their love and saying how amazing you are. I can't get over it. Those keep coming back. There's that smirk again. Quick question from Shelley. Have you done surgery on neuroendocrine cancer, high grade, poorly differentiated in the liver, debulking, etc.?
So generally, we don't do that. The reason for that is that these tumors, unlike well-differentiated tumors, are usually growing more rapidly. And so by the time, we are done with surgery, the recurrence rate are relatively fast. So the tumors comes back quickly because they proliferate rapidly. And even though we can clean most of the liver out, we ultimately always leave some cells behind, right? For well-differentiated neuroendocrine tumor, that's not so much of a problem because it may take years until something comes back in the liver. But for poorly differentiated, it could be very rapid. It could be 3 months, it could be 6 months, and so going through a major operation where the tumor comes back 3 or 6 months later is generally speaking not a good option because, going through an operation makes your immune system a little weaker. If you have a complication, you may not be able to go back on chemotherapy that quickly. And so everything may have to be postponed even longer. And then at that point, your tumor may sort of get a chance to take over. So rapidly or poorly differentiated neuroendocrine cancers benefit from chemotherapy because that's what sort of slows their rapid progression the best. Now, there are certain well-differentiated high-grade neuroendocrine tumors, so G3, well-differentiated G3, that if they respond well to systemic therapy, could be considered for primary tumor removal or surgical debulking. We need probably a little bit more data on that, a little bit more studies, but that certainly has been done before.
Got it. Thank you so much. Okay, still moving along with some of the questions. Yeah, here's a question I think is relevant, especially because we had an episode on this. Linda says, "Are you a supporter of the NET test?" And if you aren't familiar, we had on Dr. Irvin Modlin on the first episode of Luncheon with the Experts, which was the creator of the NET test. So what are your thoughts about the NET test?
So I think what the NET test does is it looks at sort of, certain gene profiling that's circulating in your blood. The thinking is always that if you have a certain tumor that is spread outside of the vicinity or where it started, or even if it hadn't, there's always cells that sort of tumor cells that get access to blood systems, circulate in your blood, and most of the time the immune system responds quite well to it. But by having circulating tumor cells, there's probably also circulating genes or sort of gene expression markers that can be picked up, and that's what the NET test is based on. And as we all know, chromogranin A and other tumor markers are notoriously unreliable when it comes to being able to predict tumor burden, predict response, predict whether somebody's going to recur, predict if somebody even has a neuroendocrine tumor, because there's a lot of false positives. There are some false negatives as well. And so obviously trying to improve the diagnostic capabilities and developing markers that will help predict whether a patient has a tumor, whether a tumor comes back, how he's going to respond to a certain therapy, he or she, is really important. And I think that the NET test is a good first step towards that goal. The data that has been published so far has been mostly single institution or retrospective data. And even though it looks promising, I do think that it needs to be validated on a larger scale. And that's what's actually going on right now. As far as I understand, in the United States, there are several centers that are validating the NET test on a prospective basis. And I think ultimately, when we compare this head to head with other biomarkers that we have, this is really how we're going to see whether this could be something that would be applied regularly on a daily basis in clinic, like we apply, for example, chromogranin A right now. So I'm very optimistic, and I hope that the data that has been out so far will be validated in these larger trials, because that would, I think, be a big step forward.
Got it. Thank you. Just want to say a shout out to some of our attendees from all over the world. I'm seeing we have people from Russia, from Uruguay. As I said a little while ago, we're going to have to stop pretty sharply on the hour, so I don't know that we'll be able to get to everybody's questions, but we really, really appreciate you all attending today. And just a reminder that if we don't get to your question, reach out to Carcinoid Cancer Foundation. You can send them a direct message on Facebook, or you can contact them at their website, carcinoid.org. And the video will live here on the Facebook page, so you can always refer back to it. Let's see. Oh, and by the way, and thanks, Pat, I see Pat is adding some information on the NET test, and we also put the links up there for clinicaltrials.gov, so you all can check that out. Dr. Keutgen, what are the challenges specifically with this disease when it comes to surgery? I know this is what you mostly focus on. What are the unique challenges that present themselves?
Yeah, so I think for me as a surgeon, the biggest challenge is obviously, if you have a tumor that's localized in your pancreas, in your small bowel, that's pretty, in your lung, that's pretty straightforward. We know that surgical removal is your chance for cure, so you should certainly consider that. Although, as a sort of side note, with pancreatic neuroendocrine tumors, if they are very tiny, sometimes we don't recommend surgery, but we'll just watch them. But generally speaking, surgery for localized tumors is or can be curative. The challenge, of course, is when the tumor has spread outside of the vicinity of where it started, and when do you apply surgery to, let's say, debulk the liver or clean out the liver, and resect the primary tumor. So I think there are a certain subset of surgeons that are really convinced, and I'm one of them, that debulking surgery or cytoreductive surgery for well-differentiated neuroendocrine tumor makes a big difference long-term in terms of survival. It may potentially even improve certain therapies like prRT. There is some data that has shown that for small bowel neuroendocrine tumors, if you have a lesions that are greater than 3 centimeters in your liver, perhaps you respond less well to PRT. And again, it comes back to the principle on, does the PRT really like penetrate throughout the tumor, and especially if they are larger, does really affect like the entire tumor. So can surgery then perhaps by removing a larger tumor make PRT work better on the smaller tumor or the microscopic cells that we cannot see during surgery? Those are all questions, I think, that still pose a challenge, and that are highly debated, honestly, between NET specialists across the US and across the world. When we go to our NANETs or ENETs, like conferences, which, by the way, this year is going to be virtual, we highly debate these questions. Who benefits the most from cytoreductive or debulking surgery? Who benefit perhaps better from upfront PRT or like other systemic therapies? And so this is really, I think, what as surgeons we can focus on. Medical oncologists are really good at being able to design these beautiful trials where they compare one drug to another, one drug to placebo. But surgeons, I think, also have to step up and prove that what we are doing can make other therapies better and can sort of like improve a long-term survival. And this is what I think Jim Rod and I are really trying to do by starting these trials, which will be some of the first prospective surgical NET trials that have been done. And we're very excited about that.
Speaking of PRT, Janice says, hi, Rain and Dr. Keutgen, should someone having PRT have a CT scan between treatments?
Yeah, great question. So I generally like to do some form of a scan, not a gallium scan, but usually a CT, or I'm a big proponent of like MRIs because there's no radiation and because they're usually much better to look at the liver lesions and sort of assess changes in sizes of the liver lesions. But I'm a big proponent of getting some form of imaging studies after 2 cycles, so right before the 3rd cycle, so after 4 months. And we've published a paper in Surgery just earlier this year, a couple of months ago, where we looked at I think 30 or 40 patients that underwent PRT according to different subtypes, small bowel or like pancreatic, and we sort of looked at whether your subtype predicted after 2 cycles whether you're going to respond or not. So I do think it's helpful to have an idea after 2 cycles, which is 4 months of therapy, what is going on. And depending on whether you have a pancreatic neuroendocrine tumor or a small bowel neuroendocrine tumor, it sort of can give you a little bit of a hint on what is going to happen over the next 2 cycles. So for example, for small bowel neuroendocrine tumors, we found that most of the time, when you had a stable response after 2 cycles, so when your tumor stayed stable, you remained stable after 4 cycles. For pancreatic neuroendocrine tumors, even though you were some patients were stable after 2 cycles, we found about 50% chance that you will actually respond after 4 cycles. So that's sort of like interesting because it can help the physician sort of think ahead and plan what's going to come after the 4 cycles. And certainly if you have really clear progression after 2 cycles, PRT may not be the right therapy for you, and then you may not be want to finish the 4 cycles but switch over to another therapy. So I'm a proponent of scanning after 2 cycles. Yes.
Got it. Well, I think with respect to Dr. Keutgen's time, we started a little bit early so that we could make sure he could get out and make his 12 o'clock for his time, 1 o'clock for us on the East Coast, his next appointment. But I just want to say that I've seen, we talked a lot about PRT and surgery today. I did see a lot of questions coming through about lung nets, and we had one about dip neck as well. And I just want to reiterate that CCF will have a video coming out about that topic soon, and probably a luncheon with the experts as well, with some of the people who really specialize in those. I saw a lot of comments from people from overseas and people saying we need more NET specialists over here. Well, this is exactly what we're trying to to accomplish with this program, with Luncheon with the Experts, is to give you this virtual one-on-one with the top specialists in the world and in the neuroendocrine cancer community, so that we hope that this is helping you along your journey and helping you get educated and everyone get more aware of this disease and how we combat it. I just want to say, Dr. Keutgen, thank you so much. I made little jokes along the way, but sincerely, there was a lot of comments about just how great you've been. So the people clearly are speaking, and your reputation is, like I said, precedes you, and they love working with you, and I do too. And I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
Sure. Thank you very much, Rain. And to your previous point, again, don't forget about virtual visits. Now I think it's a lot easier to get access to people all over the world.
Totally.
So that's certainly something that we are switching towards, and I think hopefully there'll be a time where we can all talk to each other like very easily, and we can give you recs wherever you are, whether you're in Europe or like in Australia. It certainly would not matter. So, and thank you. This was a really great opportunity. I always feel like the hour flies by with you, Rain. So you're
that means I'm doing my job well.
I'm gonna give you a little bit more love there. And thank you for everybody that has watched. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and I hope that we could do it again soon in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you as well. Thanks to those at home that attended today. Thanks again to our presenting sponsor, Lexicon Pharmaceuticals. Without them, this program wouldn't be possible. And join us next time on Luncheon with the Experts. Be healthy, be safe, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.